everybody, thanks a lot for joining me for this video. Do you ever do makeup looks where you're like, you know, this is just my look, this is exactly what I like to do with my makeup and I don't really care if it suits anyone else? That's kind of what I've done with myself today. I've done like this berry sort of smoky eye. I've got this rich berry lip where I actually took MAC's Rebel, used one of these lip toppers. I've been curious about these from Jouer in Skinny Dip. I used a little bit of that in the center. Anyways, I'm enjoying this makeup look today. We're talking palettes in this video. I've gotten quite a few new ones lately. I'm looking at a stack of 6 right in front of me, and I just thought before my makeup using life goes any further, I just want to show these. I want to swatch them out. I want to just chat about these with my viewers so you guys can get a closer look, because in some cases these palettes that I have are like, they're not what they appear to be on websites where you may shop for these things, you know? Some of it's in a good way, some of it's in a bad way, but I just wanted to share the swatches with you. And in some shots I'm like showing close-ups of the palettes, and if I look different or look like I have a different makeup look on, I do. I did that on a different day, and time and babies just didn't allow that video to get shot that day, so I'm finishing up today. But everything I have to talk about here, it's kind of random, a little bit different, but I think this will be fun. So the first one I want to mention is the Bare Sensuals palette. It's from Bare Minerals, Bare Essentials, so I kind of like the play on words there with Bare Sensuals. It's kind of like their whole, you know, company name there. But what this palette's doing, it's packing itself full of warm shades and kind of plummy purpley shades, and that's a combo I freaking love. And I think the Bare Minerals shadows are great. I've really enjoyed different duos and quads that I have, and this palette, I gotta say, I've been more impressed by this palette than probably any special edition type of palette that they've put out. It's a really nice mix, and it's not what it seems, because you take a glance at it and you're like, okay, bunch of light shades, and in so many palettes, it's like the first few light colors that they put in, a lot of times they all end up looking the same. It's kind of like, what was the point in giving us this many shades of this general tone? But everything here is unique, and a lot of these light shades end up going on deeper than what they appear. I mean, you've got your absolute lightest ones here at the end. They look light, and I promise you those are light. But as you get just into this zone right here, there's some very interesting things happening. Like Indulge, that's a really grayish color, and there's more depth and more richness to these as you swatch them and put them on your eyes. So I love to find that. That's a happy surprise for me with an eyeshadow palette. And the textures are really nice and varied as well. Mattes over on this end, matte, matte. Some are really just kind of walking the line with just a little bit of sheen, like Hot Spell. That kind of performs like a matte, but it's got just a little satin finish. Some gorgeous shimmers, a couple of shades with a little sparkle here, including Catalyst and Mystify. Catalyst is a little bit dry to the touch, but I find it still applies fine on my eyes. But I just love what they chose to do with the palette. As I look back at my swatches, I think, wow, that top row, so warm, so surprisingly coppery, with shades like Cloud 9 right in there in the center. And then the bottom row is plummy and beautiful and can give you, you know, as deep of a plum smoky eye as you could possibly want, but you also have some kind of light things, almost borderline pastel things to work with there too. And then the one at the very end called Upgrade. Very interesting shade here. My taupe lovers out there, I mean, we're talking a mixture of taupe and charcoal. If taupe and charcoal had a baby, it would be that kind of color. And again, the feel of these shades, they just have a really nice richness to them and just a surprising amount of color payoff to shades that even, you know, like Shazam right over here, Indulge, they look deeper actually in use than they do in the palette itself. I went ahead and put Waltz on my lid. I've got in the crease a little bit of Hot Spell, a little bit of Catalyst in the crease, also a little Ensemble, which is a nice, rich, kind of like mix of black and plum. A little bit of that in the crease, and definitely smudged on the lower lash line also, and I used some Mystify somewhere in there as well. I can't remember where I put that, but that's the fun of palettes. You know, you can bounce around, do it however you want, but I think it's really cool that you could stay in like one color tone zone up here with the top row, and, you know, very plummy brownie and taupey on the bottom, or you can mix them, and they play so well together when you mix shades like Cloud 9 with this deeper color like Ensemble or something like that. You can get some really pretty looks. So this is right up my alley. I'm very glad I got it, and the quality is just spectacular. Next thing I got is from Tarte, and this is the Make Believe in Yourself. It says eye and cheek palette, so there is a highlighter in here. I wasn't sure actually if that highlighter at first was supposed to be face highlight or just work with your eyeshadow look. I think it can go either way, but this is kind of an unusually colorful palette for Tarte, because so much of what they put out in terms of eyeshadow palettes seems to be browns and plums over and over again in various formats, and here they really went bold with shimmer. So there is only one matte shade in here, and it's this color called Myth, and it's this light kind of rosy nude brown type of color, and it is nice. It's definitely the kind of thing that many of us would instinctively like put that crease brush in there and just get that laid down in the crease. But really, for me to be satisfied with this palette as a standalone palette, I think it needs one other dark matte shade, just saying, because there's so much shimmer in here, and the shimmers are not just like kind of shimmery. Some of them are absolutely like wet looking. There are colors like Crystal or Pixie or, you know, Dream. They feel like kind of standard shimmery eyeshadows. You know, there's a nice texture to them. They're kind of buttery and smooth. But then going down this side like Magic and Wings and this color down here called Trance, it's like those actually feel almost creamy, and they don't necessarily pick up so well with certain kinds of brushes. Like they can pack onto your lid really nicely. So much of what's in this palette is like a pack on your lid statement shimmer type of shade. But if you want to kind of blend into the crease with one of these, or if you think you're going to dip a pencil brush into one of these and smudge it on your lower lash line, I found that colors like Magic here, where I was relying on it to be just a little bit darker than the other thing I had on my lid, it didn't apply so well with brushes that weren't just going to absolutely pack it on like a flat brush. So I just feel like a lot of what I'm talking about in this video is, do you like a standalone palette that can have everything you need in it, that you can think, I'm going to travel, I'm going to put one thing in my bag and that'll be all I need to create a full look? If that's your mindset, if that's what you want, some of these palettes that I talk about in this video won't be that necessarily, I don't think. But then some of them, like the Bare Minerals palette that I showed, you know, they've got absolutely everything you need. But different people value different things, and I feel kind of ridiculous saying, you know, well, maybe they just need another, you know, dark matte color. Well, I'm swimming in dark matte colors here. You know, I totally have what I need to finish this palette. But that all being said, this is still going to have a hefty-ish price tag. So some people might want to think, yeah, I'm getting absolutely everything I need in there. But looking back at my swatches, I mean, the shine on some of these shades is just absolutely intense. It's nearly full of shades that are intense pops for the lid. Probably not going to be a must-have palette for everyone, but I will say I like to see Tarte doing something a little bit different with their eyeshadow palettes, because I feel like so many of the things they put out eyeshadow-wise end up looking very similar to one another. And this color in the center, by the way, I didn't really focus on that too much. A little chunky, you know, it can be smoothed out a bit at first, and it can be a very intense highlight. Subtle highlight crowd, that's probably not going to be one of your faves, but if you really want a statement type thing on the cheeks that actually kind of picks up the light in different ways, sometimes I feel like it looks more golden, sometimes it actually looks a little bit peach. An interesting color, and that can be eyeshadow or face highlight. Next thing that I got, and this is not like a brand new palette, but I guess BH Cosmetics is new to Ulta, and I just went ahead and picked this up because it just appealed to me for some reason. I thought, I want to try this. This is the Wild Child palette, and it's full of like baked style eyeshadows, but you guys know why I wanted this. If you're familiar with my videos, you probably are picking up on what I like in this, which is the peachy colors and the plums. Love that color combo, and this was really affordable, and I thought, let's just go for it. And in a lot of cases in baked type palettes, more often than not, I end up feeling like they're too dry. They're just not that easy to work with. They take a lot of work to build up on the eyes. And these actually, I wouldn't say they feel especially rich or creamy to the touch, but they're they're all very consistently smooth. There's kind of a thinness to these shades, but they're still smooth and they're pretty true to color. And you could apply these wet and get even more impact out of them. So I'm aware of that method. But even dry, I was actually really impressed with the look, and I watched these very closely for staying power, and I had an all-day wear out of these. Being thinner, I wondered about that, but I kept a close eye on them and they lasted really well. Now, I use Milani eyeshadow primer very consistently, very religiously under pretty much any shadow, and I do not have staying power problems. I just really don't. Unless the product I'm putting on is some kind of a cream consistency that might be prone to creasing or just something really unusual like that, then I might have issues. But with powder shadows, generally speaking, I put them on top of that primer and I don't have concerns. But anyway, while the packaging of this palette is kind of like cheap and tacky looking and kind of like, you know, it's what's in here, it's actually a very pretty shadow spread. You know, you got your neutrals, you got a little bit of an olivey, like a golden olive in there that I really like, a couple of purpley plum shades, and I would just say I was pleasantly surprised by this. And talking about standalone palettes, you know, everything in here is shimmery, but the deeper shades can create enough contrast for me to feel like I could wear this alone. And by deeper shades, I'm meaning this purple and this deep kind of taupey color up there. Those seem to be good enough for me actually in the crease. So yeah, I kind of thought that was a nice palette, and I know it's nothing brand new, but I just wanted to talk about it since it was new to me. Next thing, this is something you saw just briefly in my husband does my voiceover video. I pulled out this Lorac Pro I Love Brunch palette. It's just chock full of pastels, and I held off on buying this for quite a while. It wasn't grabbing me, it wasn't pulling me in and making me feel like I needed this, but curiosity got the best of me and I decided to go ahead and order it. And what you got in here are a lot of mattes, and anything that's shimmery is kind of like a soft shimmer, so nothing really what I would call metallic. And all of the shades, unlike a lot of Lorac's palettes where the shades are literally like, their names are what they are. Everything in here is kind of fun, like gluten-free, hot sauce, pancakes. It really feels like kind of an Easter egg type palette to me. I mean, there are a couple of kind of lilac purpley shades, a soft blue, you got a mint green. There's some peachy colors as well. Sorbet might be the deepest shade actually in here. And so with this palette full of soft pastel shades, you obviously don't have a lot of things to create contrast. You may need to bring in another palette to be a little bit of a buddy to this if you want more darkness, or you could just use these colors for like a pastel wash all over the lid, let's say, and just keep it really simple like that, which is probably how this palette was designed to be used. And this is a softer color palette, and they probably created some shades that maybe they just wanted to be more subtle colors, but I feel like texture wise maybe these aren't quite as soft and rich and pigmented as all the shades you would run into in the Lorac Pro 1 palette or the Pro 2 or whatever. Like Jelly Donut here, for example, just to touch it, it feels a little bit more like thin and powdery compared to some of the really like rich and creamy mattes that I know this brand can make. This palette actually made me think of another palette that has some pastels, my Dose of Color Ice Cream palette. I loved this one, and I loved it because it gave me my little taste of pastels, but it also had all these great deep tones to pair with it. Totally standalone palette if you want it to be. This gave me just enough little pops of color to keep it interesting, you know? And I look at this one from Lorac and I think it's almost more than I need of that kind of shade. Some people might absolutely love exactly what's happening in this palette, but for me, and I knew this when I bought it, I'm just not craving this many pastel colors, and the practical side of me says I'm probably not going to do a full look that I'm going to be really happy with just these shades. I need a little more dark brown, I need a little more something in there, just, you know, just in the corner, just a little bit over there. I like when a palette has at least the potential to do a full look for me. I have really been loving the all matte looks lately, and my last couple of palettes are all matte, and this one is from The Balm, and it's their Meet Matte Adore palette, or said the way it's probably supposed to be said, Meet Matador. And it says absolutely adorable, no bull, vegan. The Meet Matte franchise from the Balm has been going on for a while now. They have like a little Meet Matte palette. That was the first thing that came out, and then they went with a bigger style like this type of format for their Meet Matte Nude. Meet Matrimony was this kind of look, except it had more of a plummy and burgundy vibe in it. And now we've got this top part of the palette, very, very basic, with browns and kind of peaches, warm browns, and then down here some really deep shades that could act like, you know, your contrast shadows, but also liners. Matte Sodo down here, it's hard to tell, but that's a very dark green. This blue actually has a little sheen to it. I did a look with that on my eyes, and it can look very light, especially if you sort of pair it with a lighter shade and overlap. And Matte Lee I would describe as like a near black, like a very dark charcoal. I kind of wonder, you know, has the whole Meet Matte thing almost played itself out? Because in terms of neutral matte palettes, how far do we need to go? How much do we really need? And I felt like there were some similarities from this palette to the Meet Matrimony, which might be my favorite of all the Meet Mattes. And I look at it and I think, yeah, they've given us some, you know, medium colors, some kind of peachy, light, warm shades. I absolutely love that there's kind of a pinky color in here, this dark rusty burgundy, a plum, a absolute dark black, a dark brown, kind of interesting taupe with a hint of purple. And I don't know, I find myself just loving what's in this palette a little bit more. Not saying this is a bad palette, I don't know, unless maybe you're just a fierce collector of the Balm stuff, you might think you really want that. But if you've already got Meet Matte and also Meet Matrimony, this one, I'm not feeling so like this is an absolute must. And I can't complain quality-wise or texture-wise with these. I love working with shadows from the Balm. I think their powders just in general, be it blush or eyeshadow, are really, really good. And I love just the smoothness, the evenness, the very perfected type of look I got on my eyes using these top two rows the other day. But if you got a lot of their shadow palettes in this matte family, this is not my favorite one that they've done. And then I'm gonna wrap up this video with a palette from Hard Candy. And this is something that I just found in at Walmart, and it's the Look Pro Matte Eyeshadow Pro palette. So in here we're getting 5, 10, 15 eyeshadows, and it really kind of runs the gamut in terms of mattes. You've got warm, you've got cool, you got a little splash of purple, a little bit of red in there. The value of this palette just looks really good, you know, for what's in here, but I have spent so much time lately playing with shadows from the Balm, playing with my shadows from Viseart, and just feeling and understanding what really amazing matte shadows can do. And these are definitely down a notch from that stuff. You know, down a notch in terms of smoothness, pigmentation, the ability for each shade to uniquely stand out on my eyes. I don't really see that with this palette. They kind of stand out one from the next in swatches, certain ones, but when I get them going and shearing out on the eyes, I don't necessarily see like that every shade in here has a real purpose for being in here, especially the light shades across the top. A lot of these, you know, we could have just done with a couple of those and been fine. There's a little more uniqueness happening among the shades in the bottom two rows. This palette can give me looks that are okay, looks that are just fine, really. And if you don't want too much pigmentation, or if you feel like sometimes you dip into palettes and you're like, whoa, that was way more than I need, or you have trouble controlling certain shades, maybe this would be a softer palette or a nice palette for a beginner to start out with. I don't really want to knock this palette because it's nice to see something of this size that's all matte coming from the drugstore. That's kind of rare and unique. But at the same time, I can't sit here and tell you that it's every bit as good as, you know, the quality of the shadows from the Balm or Viseart. I'm really trying to say it Viseart because I know that's how to say it now. It's not Viseart like I like to say. I mean, I've done a handful of looks with this palette. I feel like I'm pretty aware of what it can do, but I will continue to play with this and my others as well. This video, I didn't really intend for it to be a full-on palette review, but more so just kind of showing you what's new to me, showing you the swatches, and you know, as always, you decide for yourself what you like, what you need. But thank you guys so much for taking time to be with me today for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it was informative, and I will see you again very soon. Bye.